Welcome back to Harbour Unboxed. It is that time of the month where we do our Q&As, so welcome to part one. And I don't think we need to say too much more. We reckon just get into these questions. We've got plenty to go through, so let's hit it. Today's video is sponsored by ASRock and their impressive little Z390 Phantom Gaming ITX AC motherboard. For an ITX board, it packs loads of features, including support for Intel Thunderbolt 3. And for those of you who like to show off your build, ASRock's included built-in RGB illumination along with RGB headers, including an addressable header. I've personally used this board before and it really is the best ITX board for supporting 9th gen Intel processors, so for more information please check the link in the video description. Okay, first question. Looks like it's a pretty straightforward CPU one. Should I buy the Ryzen 7 2700 or the R5 3600? I primarily game, but I also use Adobe Photoshop and Premiere on a somewhat regular basis. Thanks in advance. I don't think you can really go too wrong either way on this one. I think if you are primarily gaming, you didn't say that, but if you were, I'd probably get the 3600. But if you're encoding videos on a fairly regular basis, the 2700 will save you a little bit of time. It may not be, I don't know if you'd really notice the difference when editing. What would you say on that one?
Probably, if anything, the 3600 would be faster for editing.
It'd definitely be faster for editing, but whether you would notice that is another thing.
Probably not.
It's the same thing with gaming. Like, what GPU are you using? If it's something like a Radeon 5700 XT or slower, then the CPU doesn't matter too much. Both of these CPUs are certainly very capable. For the same price, I think I'd probably lean towards the 3600 just because the 2700 is not that much faster, even for stuff like encoding, and just that lower latency, the snappiness factor of the Zen 2 CPUs is slightly improved. So they're both around $200. I think the 2700 is about $185, so a little bit cheaper, but they're both very affordable. I don't think there's a wrong option. So yeah, got to toss up whether you want those 2 extra cores or those faster cores with better memory support or improved DRAM latency and cache latency. Anyway, that's going to do it for that one, I think.
All right, Steve, we've got the most important question from the Q&A here. Right. Why has no one actually raided Area 51?
You're right, that is an important question. I'd say because they're all playing it safe. They thought they were going to do it, but then they just decided, no, we'll stay indoors, we'll play it safe, and we'll play, what is it, Warcraft Classic. That was World of Warcraft Classic? That was it, wasn't it? Yeah. That's what they're doing. They're playing computer games. Makes sense.
Ray tracing question here. Do you think that the future of ray tracing will follow NVIDIA's method or a more open method? Ray tracing has been shown to work without RT cores and even tensor cores, just not as well in most cases. I know that developers don't like closed ecosystems, which is what NVIDIA is trying to create. With the next-gen consoles likely supporting a more open standard, I think things may change. I'd imagine that tensor cores could still be useful for denoising, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts. I think a lot of the ray tracing integrations that we've seen aren't necessarily closed. They're just AMD doesn't support ray tracing at this point, so there's no way to run DirectX ray tracing on AMD GPUs or any other sort of GPUs. I think most of what NVIDIA is doing with RTX sort of is supposed to sit below the game. Obviously, they're working a lot with game developers at the moment to integrate ray tracing, but their efforts are more about taking ray tracing commands from the game and running it on their custom hardware. So I think when it comes to other vendors, AMD and Intel in the future, I think they'll probably do something pretty similar, have some sort of hardware that's very well suited to ray tracing, and then there'll be some way for the games to get through to the GPU, and that will be controlled by AMD and Intel for their respective versions when it comes out. So yeah, I think it'll come to a point where you'll just have a ray tracing toggle and that'll work across all the vendors, and each vendor will do their own thing to get it working. So I think it will be more open, but just at the moment why it's closed is because no one else wants to support it. I think you'd agree. I don't see there's any reason for AMD to support it right now because you're not going to get a good experience without acceleration. It's going to be pretty slow.
It's just a cripple my performance button for very little visual improvement. It's kind of like, you know, enabling hairworks in the earlier versions of Witcher, The Witcher 3. So it's like, you know, you can do it, but do you want to? No.
Yeah, so AMD doesn't really see much of a reason to bother, so they won't. But yeah, there'll be improvements in the future, and yeah, I think denoising and stuff on the tensor cores will probably still be a thing, but there'll be a lot of improvements, I would imagine, to getting it running better.
All right, next one here. Could you explain why memory vendors, motherboard manufacturers, and even CPU makers note memory frequency as megahertz when it's actually MTS? Well, it's not frequency, but yeah, I know what you're saying. Is it purely for marketing, or is there something more to it? It's basically just marketing. So people, your general sort of consumer, understand what megahertz mean. They don't really understand what mega transfers per second's all about. So that's kind of a new weird thing. So it's easier just to market as being megahertz because, well, it's double data rate memory. So technically the frequency you start with is in megahertz, but then when you double it to the data rate, then it becomes a data rate thing, which is why it's in mega transfers. So they've just gone megahertz, and the more megahertz, people understand you have more megahertz, it is faster. So it's obviously a marketing thing. So that answers that one, I would say. All right, I think we'll hand this one over to Tim because I think it's resolutions have to do with monitors more than GPUs. So that's what I'm going to say.
All right, if you say so.
Just so I can give it to you. How much harder is it to run ultra-wide 1440p over normal 1440p, and what GPU would you recommend? That's a pretty easy question. I reckon we can let Tim handle this one.
Yeah, and to be fair, I do a lot of ultra-wide gaming as well. So
True.
Yeah, I mean, the 2560 by 1440 is 3.7 million pixels. You've got about 5.5 million when you step up to the ultra-wide version. So it's about 50% more pixels.
Yeah, so it's a big
50%
difference.
harder to run. I always tend to think of it as sort of fitting between your pretty evenly between 1440p and 4K.
Yep.
So pretty much smack bang in the middle of the two frame rates. If you're looking at sort of frame rate charts, that's pretty much what you're going to get. If not, just look at your 4K numbers and add a bit on and get a nice little bonus there.
Yep.
As for recommending a GPU, again, it always depends on what sort of frame rate target you want.
Yeah, and the quality settings.
Yeah,
and
and quality
all
settings. I think if you have if you want to get those high refresh 100 hertz, 144 hertz monitors and get it right up there with ultra settings, you probably will need a super high-end GPU like 2080 Ti.
Yep.
But if you're just fine with 60 hertz, maybe you want to drop things down to high or medium, or get really good frame rates on high or medium, then 2070 Super, 5700 XT, sort of your 1440p high refresh cards would do pretty well at
it's not that dissimilar really to what you'd be talking about with 4K. So
yeah. So that's pretty much it.
All right, next question here is, have you ever tried Linux? If yes, then will you ever use it for a daily driver? So I am going to answer this one quickly. And the answer is I have used it, but no, I wouldn't use it for a daily driver. I don't really like talking too much about my personal opinions of Linux because there seems to be a lot of diehard Linux fans, and if you say anything sort of negative, they really lose their minds. So I don't think Linux is particularly bad. I just don't think it's right for me, for my workflow and what I do.
Yep. Pretty much the same here.
You're not going to dig that hole any bigger?
No, I don't use Linux either.
Right,
Windows is fine.
Quick move on. Next question. Next question is, what do you think of the 7nm delay at TSMC? Will this stop AMD's momentum given that the 3950X will be delayed until November?
So apparently the delay at TSMC is not related to AMD's delay. That's
okay.
Apparently they would have already ordered the chips well before the delays came into effect.
So the
delay is only affecting new orders.
That's right, yes.
So basically all of AMD's chiplets would have been ordered, I don't know how long ago, but probably a significant amount of time before now. And I assume that they're just in a bit of a crunch right now, having to deal with AMD's relatively small order relative to Apple's iPhone A13 Bionic chip orders, which would have been enormous for TSMC. So, yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that these things get delayed, but really we're still in a pretty good spot with Ryzen as it is at the moment. There's still lots of attractive products and pushing out a little bit. I don't think we'll make too much of a difference.
as long as we don't see sort of like your 3600X start going out of stock.
Yeah,
because they'll obviously be like the key sellers. As much as people are wanting to get their hands on a 3900X, I don't know how the sales figures of like the $500 part compared to the $200 part. But anyway, it's not ideal for AMD, that's for sure. It's not really. I don't know how much it's hurting their momentum.
Yeah, I mean, you say it's not ideal for AMD, but also in that space, a 16-core mainstream desktop chip. It's not like they're competing with Intel in that space. Intel doesn't really have a competitor, so there's no choice at the moment for people between an Intel option and AMD's delayed option. There's
Sure,
just
but
no
if you've got a
option.
customer wanting to buy your product, you obviously
That's true.
want to
That's
sell
true.
that. You are potentially missing out on sales
Yep.
by not having the product in stock, because if
I
someone...
think it'll be sold out anyway, though.
Well, yeah, it's a good thing they delayed it, because if the 3900X was anything to go by, it was just going to be abysmal. Like, there was going to be no review samples. You basically wouldn't be able to buy one. It'd be a paper launch. So if they can delay it a bit and get stock levels reasonable by the time they launch it, then that would be that would be better for everyone.
Yeah, and iron out a few BIOS issues if there's any. Make sure that launch is really solid, so that we're not in another boost clock situation where they have to explain that again.
Yep. I think for the viewers as well, once you've seen the review and you've seen the results and you're all excited to get it, and then the fact that you can't get it, it's probably better to know that this has been delayed 2 months to when you can see the reviews and buy it and have a chance of buying one. So that one's that. We'll move on. The next one here looks like this is an Intel CPU question. How high would Intel's TDPs be? I was going to say TDB, but it's definitely a TDP. Be reported at an all-core boost instead of the base clock. So basically, at the moment they report the TDP based on the minimum frequency that the CPU will achieve. And we know that's not the all-core, because when it runs at all-core, it uses more power. So I know they're very vague. What about the 95 watts for the 1900K, for example? So you could actually look at the packaged TDP, which is the TDP metric they use in Intel's Extreme, the Extreme...
XTU, the Extreme Tuning
Utility. Yeah, that's it. Use the XTU software, and if you do that with a 9900K, just stock out of the box, no tweaking or anything, my one consumes around, goes up to a TDP of about 125 watts. So it can vary depending on how much voltage your board uses, but that's a really well-tuned, optimized board. So the TDP, I would say, would have to be at least 125.
Yep.
Which, is like 25 watts over something like the 3900X, which makes sense given if you look at total system consumption comparing those two CPUs. My boy Kev from Tech Showdown comes in with a really serious tech-related question that you don't really expect from someone called Tech Showdown. If you could only drink one alcoholic drink for the rest of your lives, what would you pick? I'm not too fussed, personally. They all work. And I'm pretty basic when it comes to drinking. I don't drink that often, and I haven't tried a huge range of alcoholic beverages. But if I'm given my choice, I do like Gentleman Jacks.
Yep, that's not bad.
They're delicious. Love them. Could drink them all night.
I don't even know what I would choose. No idea.
So you're not even going to give us something?
No, I'm not even going to give anything.
Tim's giving you guys nothing. All right, we'll move on then. On that disappointment, we'll jump to the next question. Did you guys have to purchase the games for the benchmark? So I think he means in general. Or did the game publisher sponsor them? So when we... Borderlands 3, for example, I benchmarked it. Tim did a little graphical optimization guide that no one watched. You got way more views than me. Yep. Did we buy those? So we both bought our copy, didn't we?
Yep.
And then someone threw a key at us.
I think it was AMD.
AMD threw a key our way.
Yeah, so the way this usually works is that, when you see the NVIDIA or AMD logos at the start of games and, the NVIDIA or AMD sponsored titles, usually those companies do end up with game keys to give away to people like us. Mm-hmm. So for most game launches I can think of, like Gears 5, we got keys from AMD, Control we got from NVIDIA. So, a lot of the time they do have keys, but at the same time, they don't often have them at launch, which is when we'd want to ideally be doing our testing. So most of the time we do end up purchasing them as well. Mm-hmm. For a game like Gears 5, for example, I bought the Ultimate Edition, which gives you early access, which is even better than getting the keys from those companies. So, and normally if we end up with keys, we just give them away, especially to our Patreon members. Mm-hmm. That's usually how it works. Sometimes we could get review keys that would give us like actual early access, so before you can get it for the general public, as reviewers normally get, but those are not very often.
Well, they're also not very beneficial, particularly for me, because usually the game-ready drivers aren't available. So we've made the mistake in the past. I've scrambled to, get the benchmark video out first before other media outlets do, and then day one drivers come and they improve performance by 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever percent. They fix bugs and whatnot.
The review copies are really for testing the game's
storyline and all that sort of stuff.
As opposed to benchmarking. So, yeah, goes a bit of both ways. But it is always nice to get keys from companies because even if we don't end up using it, we do like giving away things when we can. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
And see, Kev, that's how you ask a tech-related question. All right, next one. What do we have here? We have, if AMD already has a slightly higher IPC than Intel, what will it take for AMD to surpass Intel in gaming?
Interesting one.
Well, we kind of know because we've done, our clock-for-clock IPC testing. So clock frequency, not such a big deal anymore because depending on the workload, they do have significantly higher IPC. I mean, it's a tough thing to measure, really. But for gaming, the issue appears to be core-to-core latency, cache latency, and DRAM latency.
Yep.
So that's just stuff that they refine with each generation. See, Intel's been refining what their architecture for how long now?
Yeah, ages.
A long time. So they're miles ahead of AMD in that refinement process. And then, we've seen AMD get, tighter core-to-core latency as we've gone from first to second to third gen and stuff like that. So, it's just basically refining the architecture. But they're so close now anyway that it really doesn't matter. Like, if you take a 1900K or a 3900X and you're gaming at 4K or 1440p, the difference is so small. It's really like taking a super high-end graphics card, testing at a super low resolution, where you're going to see a reasonable difference.
And also be interesting to see whether Intel goes a bit backwards if they start producing higher core count CPUs.
I've always predicted they will.
Yeah, because we know that their high-end desktop platform doesn't work as well for gaming as their mainstream platform. And if they need to compete with, say, a 16-core mainstream part, then their current design isn't going to be super effective for that. So, there might even be a situation where Intel has no choice but to sort of reduce that level of performance. But then again, it also wouldn't surprise me if they kept their current design for a certain core count or lower. They seem to be not necessarily afraid of making multiple different dies for different sort of...
Yeah, or you get like a modular chip that has some fast cores. And
that's a possibility as well.
There's a few different ways they
and
can
we
go
know
about
that
it.
They're working on that sort of design at the moment. So
it's really hard to predict.
Yeah. Next question is, where does Tim download his wallpaper for his monitor reviews?
I see every time you do a monitor review, most of the questions aren't about the monitor, it's about the wallpaper. Yeah. So I don't know what that says about your reviews.
There used to be a really good website that's now defunct called Interface Lift, where I downloaded... People used to upload their photography.
Okay.
As sort of just like, you can use this as a wallpaper, do whatever you want. And it used to be a lot of like nature landscapes, which I used to really like because I think they show off a monitor really well. But that site doesn't exist anymore. So I think Wallhaven is a new one that's pretty good, but you have to refine some of your search terms in there to get nature-related ones.
Okay.
There's a lot of like cars and girls on there as well and game screenshots. So filter all those out and get the nature ones, and that's what I usually go with because I think they look really good.
Okay, Steve, I'm going to ask a serious question. Why do all the non-serious questions start with that? But this actually isn't too bad. Unboxing boxes, number 58, when? Yeah, I know. I'm way behind on getting my unboxing boxes out. I think unboxing boxes was a series I did quite regularly when we had that slowdown where it wasn't like, there wasn't a heap of CPU and GPU releases, and I was sort of looking at other things and venturing out a bit, peripherals and stuff that we don't really cover. But it's like 5700 XTs are flying in the door each day, 5700s, X570 motherboards, and I can't really let them accumulate and then do an unboxing boxes because you guys like wanting to know about it straight away. So I've sort of just got to rip it out of the box and get testing. So I haven't really got a backlog of stuff. I've got a couple of things, but not a whole lot. But I don't know. Maybe we'll be able to squeeze one in next month. We'll see how we go. All right, what's the difference between 3+3 and a 4+2 phase VRM? Which is better? What do I look like, Buildzoid? Just quickly, the really, really basic summary version. This is a good question for a guy like Buildzoid, though. So the first number there is usually the V-core portion of the VRM. So in the 3+3, you'd have a 3-phase V-core VRM, and then the other three would be like your SoC or an integrated GPU or something else, depending on what the CPU is or the APU. So there's there's no real answer here as in which one's better. Like, obviously, 4 phases, well, is more desirable, but then it comes down to the components. So if you have a 3-phase VRM with 70 amp power stages, and then you've got a 4-phase with like some really cheap MOSFETs, then the 3-phase would be better. So phase count's not everything, I guess, is what I'm saying. And maybe you want a 3+3 if you've got an APU with a really beefy GPU, whereas the 2-phase may not cut it. But yeah, the phases aren't super important, especially when they're that close. Like if it was a 3-phase versus like a 12-phase, then you can almost safely guarantee the 12-phase will be better. But 3 to 4, it's like, it just comes down to the components they use. So yeah, that's that one. Okay, that's going to do it for part 1 of the September Q&A. Again, we crept in pretty good this month.
Oh, plenty of time. Plenty of time to spare.
Still very much September. We'll have a part 2 tomorrow on the channel. Then after that, we'll have the Patreon round, so you guys can hear us address questions from our Patreon members. So yeah, plenty more questions to come. All good stuff, but that is going to do it for this video. So obviously, thank you for watching. You can like, subscribe. You can even join us on Patreon if you want to get access to our Discord chat, monthly live streams. We just did that a few hours ago, which will be like a day ago by the time they watch this video. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'm Steve.
I'm Tim.
This is Tim, guys. Cool. See you next time.